Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Theresa May has pronounced herself optimistic that she will get a good deal for the UK. Her French and German counterparts have warned that a hard Brexit will involve commensurately hard negotiations. And the former European Commissioner, Jonathan Hill, has revealed that many senior EU figures still don't believe that Britain will go through with it at all. Do you know, there's even been reports today that EU officials may lobby to have the negotiations conducted in French. So it's fair to say that there's no more consensus abroad about what Brexit might end up looking like than there is at home. Newsnight's diplomatic editor Mark Urban has been surveying the scene on the side of the negotiating table where the 27 countries staying in will be sitting opposite the one pulling out.
The Prime Minister's been very clear. From the moment she arrived at the summit,
the UK is leaving the EU.
Until just before she left today.
The UK is leaving the EU?
Yes, that seems straightforward enough. The British government's policy is to leave the EU by activating Article 50 before the end of March. So why do many people in Brussels not believe it?
There is a surprisingly widely held view that Britain might still decide to stay in, and I think that's partly, it explains why previously Donald Tusk has talked about it's hard Brexit or no exit.
And it's not just the Commission or Brussels civil service. It's Germany, critically, that has apparently adopted a policy that Britain needs to be given as much time to change its mind as it needs.
The worst thing that can happen is Brexit, and it remains the worst thing. And now, after the referendum, which is not legally binding, I think there is no sense, really no sense, in urging the Britons to accomplish what is considered by all of us to be the worst outcome we can think of.
In Whitehall and the country more widely, people care passionately about Brexit. But that's not the case in many of the other 27 EU countries. And that's why the issue has been so far down this week's summit agenda, and why many of those nations are ready to fall in behind a German lead that says, play it long, wait for the British to develop buyer's remorse, particularly if their economy suffers. And earlier this week, with the experience of sterling's fall still fresh in people's minds, the EU ratcheted up the pressure another notch, offering the UK a chance, it seemed, to change its mind, even after it invokes Article 50.
We will conduct the negotiations in good faith. Defend the interest of the EU 27, minimize the costs and seek the best possible deal for all. But as I have said before, I am afraid that no such outcome exists that will benefit either side. Of course, it is and can only be for the UK to assess the outcome of the negotiations and determine if Brexit is really in their interest.
That last phrase suggests the UK can abandon Brexit once Theresa May has seen what her fellow leaders are prepared to offer. It undermines British government legal arguments that Article 50 is irrevocable and may offer another 2 years for Downing Street to change its mind. And all the time, EU leaders will be using their leverage, for example by closing the UK out of many discussions, something the Prime Minister complained about today.
We will be, as I've said, in the first quarter of next year invoking Article 50. There will be a process for the 27 to consider how they are going to conduct the negotiations. But we will continue to play our role, as I have done, sitting around the table today. I can assure you that I haven't been backwards in coming forwards on issues.
So ended a summit and a week where the 27 continued in their refusal to have any pre-negotiation of Brexit, and for good measure threatened to keep going uncertainty about the UK and its economy well beyond the activation of Article 50.
Well, we've got some breaking news tonight concerning another EU deal. Mark Urban is here now. Mark, what's happened?
Well, essentially, this is a breakdown, or appears to be, of trade talks with Canada. It's a long saga. The talks themselves went on for nearly 7 years. And for the past year or so, the EU has been trying to ratify an agreement with Canada, this trade agreement. Talks have broken down. The Canadian Trade Minister, Chrystia Freeland, tonight said the EU is incapable of doing this deal, even with a country like us of very similar values. It's a tortuous saga. Frankly, it's straight out of the Leave campaign playbook, in the sense that it's a dramatic illustration of how convoluted, hidebound and ultimately frustrating it is to try and do free trade through an EU framework. Now, whether they're able to revive this, we can't yet say, but the Canadians for the moment are saying they've given up, thwarted at the last minute by a region of Belgium that wouldn't agree to it.
And conversely, it surely also has implications for any prospect of a UK deal with the EU.
Well, it's like the most extraordinary diplomatic conundrum, isn't it, in a way? Because on the one hand, you can say, oh, Lord, deliver us from this sort of process that Canada has been put through. But for the UK to get to that point where it can cut its own free trade deals with countries like Canada, China, whatever, it's going to have to go through a very similar process. And in that sense, it's a bit of a harbinger, a bit of a nightmarish harbinger about how complex things might be if all 27 of the other states choose to use their own points of pressure. It might be Spain on Gibraltar, it might be Romania on workers' rights in Britain, all these points that they might have to hold up agreement of any deal when it is finally reached.
Happy days for diplomatic editors there. Thank you very much indeed, Mark Urban.